Hello, and welcome back for another video. It's been a little while. I will wholeheartedly admit that I don't really have a whole lot of time to usually set aside for this account, and plus I'm also just not really the greatest guy in the world with graphics or editing, so I've kind of pushed this to the back burner a bit and pretty much only use it if something comes up that I feel like I absolutely need to illustrate this way as opposed to on Twitter or through writing. Well, this is one of those things, and it's something I have touched on many, many times before, but I want to kind of nip it in the bud for once and for all, and that is the subject of average finish in NASCAR, which I personally believe to be the most overvalued statistic, not just in racing, but maybe in all of sports, and I'm going to give a full breakdown here of exactly why. So to me, average finish is a fatally flawed statistic because it combines two factors that inherently distort its value, one of which is luck, which we'll get to in a bit, and the other one is the condensing of a race's finishing order in such a way that the difference between every position is the same. This graph here, this is what the value of each position looks like if you use average finish. It's a straight diagonal line from first to last place. The difference between first and second place is considered the same difference between 10th and 11th place, the same difference between 20th and 21st place, the same difference between 39th and 40th place. And that's just not how performance works. I think at any level of any sport, if you took the most consistently middle of the road performer possible, there is a far, far, far greater gap in talent between that person and whoever's the best, as opposed to them and whoever's the worst. And we see this in NASCAR all the time, that so much of the discrepancies between the middle third or so of the field and the back third of the field, they all depend on situation. Ryan Preece is in contention for a playoff spot this year after running 25th his whole career until now because he's in a better situation than he's ever had. There's probably at least half a dozen guys 25th or worse in points who could be doing the same thing in this 60 car. But what you're not going to see is one of those drivers jump in a Hendrick car and start dominating races. You look at what Alex Bowman has done throughout his career after getting an opportunity from being stuck on some bad teams, and he's a solid driver who can compete for a win every so often, but he's not Kyle Larson. And that's not a shot against him or anything. It's just a statement of fact that even at the top level in the world, talents like Larson don't grow on trees. So I think it has to be acknowledged that if you really want an accurate representation of what the value of each result in a race looks like, it would look more like this, which average finish will inherently fail to reflect. As a finishing position increases in value, so does the rate by which the skill discrepancy between positions increases. In other words, the difference in the amount of skill it takes to run 20th instead of 30th is very marginal, but it takes a much bigger difference to run 10th instead of 20th, and a much, much, much bigger one to win instead of running 10th. So that's the first part of the fallacy with average finish, and by extension with any point system that's built to be more closely aligned with the first graph as opposed to the second graph. The other part, as mentioned already, is luck. I think using a similar concept to the performance curve that I just illustrated, I think it can also be said that the more the value of a finishing position increases, the more the value of luck tends to decrease. In simpler terms, it's much easier to have a bad finish as a result of bad luck than it is to have a good finish as a result of good luck. How often do you see somebody run 30th all race long and then somehow finish in the top 5? Basically never, unless it's some super speedway crash fest or something. But all it takes to finish 30th with a top 5 car is to get caught up in a wreck you didn't cause, or have a flat tire, or an engine problem, or some other parts failure, or even just a badly timed caution sometimes. And this is all extremely important to recognize when discussing average finish because when you're dealing with averages, the results that will most heavily influence that average aren't the ones that align most closely with it. They're the ones that deviate the furthest from it. So when you're dealing with two similar drivers, two good drivers, the separation in average finish isn't going to come from one of them busting out and having a dominant win somewhere. It's going to come from one of them having a race where something goes wrong for them and they finish 35th. In this example here, driver A finishes ahead of driver B in 5 out of 7 races. Driver A has a win and multiple top 5s, driver B has none. But driver B has the better average finish by 2 positions, all because driver A had one bad result, which almost certainly wasn't because they just showed up and ran 35th one day. That all adds up over the course of a full season, and if you have maybe just 4 or 5 bad finishes, regardless of whether or not they're your fault, you have to be pretty much perfect to make up for it. Again, because average finish will fail to account for the performance curve in which the value of a win is recognized to be much greater than the lack of value in a poor finish. You look at Kyle Larson's 2021 season, likely the greatest season of at least the past decade, maybe the past quarter of a century. He didn't lead the series in average finish that year. If this was the point per possession system before stage points and with a full season format, that was probably going to be another 1996 situation. So, in summary, this is the illusion of average finish. Basically, when you look at it in a vacuum, all it is a reflection of whoever has the least amount of bad luck. Does it require some skill to have the best average finish? Sure, but is it the best way to measure a driver's performance? Absolutely not. I think especially in today's NASCAR, where races are designed to generate highlight reel entertainment with overtimes and chaotic restarts and the incentive to win at all costs, all of which just foster more reckless driving that leads to random number generated finishing orders, average finish only rewards glorified mediocrity. Even in the previous years before the playoffs, you had a whole separate issue of the fact that equipment was less reliable, engine and mechanical failures were a lot more common, and there were fewer cautions. So if you had any sort of problem, even something fixable like a flat tire that only cost you a lap, you were in all likelihood stuck a lap down the whole rest of the day. So no matter how you slice it, average finish in NASCAR has always been and always will be a flawed statistic when you're dealing with championship level drivers. It punishes bad finishes more than it rewards good ones, and in a sport where it's much harder to control avoiding those bad finishes than it is to string together good ones, that's just completely backwards. If you want to look at what truly defines greatness, then you need to look at numbers that minimize the luck variable. And the way to do that, as mentioned previously, means focusing on stats that are built around, actually being the best. Wins, laps led, or God forbid, should NASCAR ever decide to implement a point system that's designed on a curve, that way winning is more helpful than having a bad finish is hurtful. Something like IndyCar uses would be ideal, just extrapolated for a larger field size. But average finish is only an illusion. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.